Hello again, thank you for joining me for another video. So I've been thinking recently about spiritual teachers and why I don't like them. I've kind of gotten into the habit lately of just really not being able to tolerate listening to any spiritual teacher anymore. And I was curious what was happening within me that was causing this kind of like repulsion and quickly needing to move away from anything that people are teaching at this point. I'm not interested. I think it's because I've really kind of gotten into the active phase of, I've done the integration work and now I want to do stuff. I'm not okay with the kind of sitting back and receiving information anymore. I want to practice with the information and see what I can do with it. And so I haven't been able to tolerate it lately. But it really got me thinking that it's kind of always been there. There's been a little bit of, the way that spiritual teachers are presented in this modern situation is that there is a lot of competition because there is some monetary value attached to many and most of the spiritual teachers out there. And so that always gives a little bit of, things are presented in a way to make them more marketable. And in that presentation, they lose a little bit of that sharp edge that spiritual teaching has. It's more palatable for a wider audience, so it isn't necessarily applicable to me and my life and what I have, where I need to apply it. Because I've had a weird life, and so I get a little bit from spiritual teachings, but mostly I have to translate it into a way that integrates with what my real life experience has been. As I was being exposed to spiritual teachers, I was also trying to heal from decades of trauma and misunderstanding who I was and what life was all about, and trying to make sense of the confusing narratives and all of that, right? And so I was in a lot of pain. And I was getting, so for me, dealing with spiritual teachers at that time was like going to therapy and being lectured. Like the therapist talks the whole time and you, instead of the other way around. And so it was really unfulfilling. And I know that I can't possibly be the only one that's experienced that kind of reflection from dealing with the spiritual teachers. It's good to get a certain amount of information and some agreement about language and nuance, especially when we're dealing with large concepts and realms, like, the formless nature of reality. I think we could continue to unpack that from here until, forever. Really, there's so much information. Everything that we've ever looked at can be looked at 1,001 different ways. And so there's always something to be really gathered from spiritual teachers. But holding space for your trauma is really not their wheelhouse. For me, it felt lacking. It felt lacking to me. I didn't want to be a perfected being. I wanted to stop suffering. And the methods that I was hearing really had to do with things like faith and things like not being a person and dissolving my ego. And none of those things were directing me towards the real life comfort and interaction that I needed to specifically release the traumas that were plaguing me. So there's some exceptions to these, but I would not call those exceptions actual spiritual teachers. I think they would be closer to shamans. So a spiritual teacher is about telling. They are taking scriptural knowledge, history, information that's been passed on from generation to generation, and they are packaging it in a way to explain it to people with modern understanding, modern interpretation. Not always, but for the most part, this is what a spiritual teacher is doing. It's taking things that have already been written down and discovered about formless nature, about spirituality, about God, and repackaging it in a way that people can consume at this point. So they're tellers. Another layer of spiritual information purveyors are the gurus. And the gurus, in my opinion, are those who are being. And they are obviously much more rare than a teacher. So there are some that present themselves online, and when you really stop and think about what they are accomplishing in real life, in real time, you can kind of tune into their presence, and it will help to clarify your own energy fields. And it's nice to be able to watch someone who is really walking the walk fully, like really being in spirit, and you know they're in spirit. There's no confusion once you kind of get your own, psychic centers clarified to some degree, and you can tune in and see their spiritual field, their aura. It's usually bigger, vibrant. I've looked at a couple of gurus and their aura, and they have like spinning energy, like nothing's getting stuck in there. They're so free flowing. So it's nice to be able to observe those people. I think it would be even better to be able to be in their physical presence. I think in the physical presence of a guru who has actually done the work to hold, clear their energy field so that it is one with the larger energy field, is a really healing experience in and of itself. Different than watching them online for sure, but I think there is some room to connect in with heart space and actually get a little bit of that clarity. So that's just what we all have to do. We have to clear our energy field and continue to keep our energy field clear, and that's part of the spiritual awakening process. I'm all for the gurus. I wish there was more, and I wish they were more accessible so that more people would have that time to be in the space of energetically clear beings, and I think it would do a lot of good. But you can't fake that, and that's why there aren't that many of them. So beyond the guru, what we have are shamans. And shamans I would call the doers. I like the word shaman. Some people don't like it. I think it's the perfect word for them. The doers on the spiritual realm. So they are more capable of actually using those forces. So rather than telling about it, rather than just being, it's an active, interactive state, utilizing spiritual energy for purpose. And a really good shaman is able to negotiate huge energy fields and the will that is contained within them. So it's a very specialized and expert level understanding of reality and the playful nature of the universe and all of these fields of consciousness at play. And it's my preferred I guess, teachers, in a manner of speaking, because they don't just come right out and say what they're doing. To understand what is going on with a shaman is to understand multidimensional reality and how it is playing out, because there's always a layer behind the action. There's a layer behind that, and it's really interesting to see how it plays out in larger fields. Shamans don't have to tell you what they're doing. They do it, and you either pick up the tuning fork of yourself to see it or not. And so it's a different level of understanding how reality works, and then taking heart that you aren't beholden, you are willful. And once you understand where your will combines with the larger fields, it takes a little of the pressure off and a little bit of the fear off, because I think a lot of times the thing that we are so afraid of is being in these little finite lifetimes here in these bodies, in these mortal bodies, and trying to comprehend the infinite nature of consciousness and the potential it holds. And so actively integrating some of those larger streams of energy can be really healing to the soul itself. So just some food for thought for you. Hopefully that gave you some things to chew on and look at. How do you feel? How has your experience been with spiritual teachers? And do you understand or think there's any relevance relevant difference between a spiritual teacher or a guru or a shaman. I'm curious to hear what you think. So, okay, until next time, take care.